Today I'm going to go over with you how we stretch barbed wire fencing. Now, if you're anything like me, you don't necessarily like barbed wire fencing. I would prefer everything be board fences. If I need electrical wire on the fences, I would prefer those electrical wires inside the board. Aesthetically, board fences are nicer. Barbed wire fences have a lot of issues if you don't keep up with them. Back in the back of our property, there were some old barbed wire fences that had fallen down that we were unaware of, and inevitably what happened was, as the horses were making their way back through the woods, one of the horses had barbed wire wrapped around their leg. It was a very eventful episode, and it was just horrible. So if you can avoid barbed wire, I would highly suggest it. If you do have it, it's very important that you understand how to repair it, the types of things that will weaken the fence so that you can be prepared to go in and replace some of the barbed wire that may be there. It is a very inexpensive fencing option, and when you first buy a property, chances are a lot of the fencing will be barbed wire. So this video, whether or not you want barbed wire, if you're going to buy land and you have the fencing in place, you have to know how to maintain it. You have to know what kind of tools you're going to need on hand, and you need to know how to run extensions to it until you're able to go through and replace all of your fencing with a safer fencing for the animals. So let's get started. I usually keep all my tools for barbed wire fencing in a bucket that I am now sitting on to do this. The first tool that I like to keep on hand is a post driver. With your barbed wire fencing, and I will show you in a few minutes some of our fencing that I have put up, you're going to have some main posts in there, but in between those posts you're going to have your steel posts that you basically just bang into the ground. And excuse me for not knowing the technical term of those posts. I am not a technical person, but I do know that the sport posts can be purchased at just about any farmer store. And in order to put those posts in the ground, you really need a post driver. These come in several different ways. A more popular form of this is the spring-loaded post driver. I'm going to go ahead and suggest, if you are new to driving posts, to just go with the standard no spring-loaded action. You've got to slam this thing down and lift it up with your arms. It's a little bit of a workout. The reason being is that these can actually be dangerous if you're not careful with them. I have actually given myself a serious concussion with working with one of these, and I'm not afraid to tell you guys when I have injured myself doing something, because somebody who's been injured can explain to others how the injury happened, and I am going to get into that in a few minutes. I'm going to take this out and show you on a post how I was actually injured from just driving this down on a post, and why a spring-loaded one may actually could actually be a little more dangerous to somebody who's starting out with one of these, and just a few safety tips on using a post driver. I've used post drivers a lot. Where I went wrong had more to do with going from driving poles in the ground for docks to driving kind of flimsy stakes in the ground that are 7 feet high. So we'll get into this a little more in a few minutes when we go down to the field. Don't want to have to carry everything down to the field, but we may end up doing it. The next, probably one of the most important tools you could have for any fencing project on your farm are these fencing pliers. These are especially important because it's basically kind of like having a Swiss Army knife with all the tools you need on it to do your fencing in one handy tool that you could easily slip into your back pocket while you're out working on the field. These have wire cutters for different gauges on each side. On one side of the tool here you have a hammer, and on the other side you have a staple puller. This is because when you're wrapping the barbed wire around your main posts, you're going to actually nail in staples to help hold it in place. And when you go back to tighten up a post that has come loose, you need to be able to go in and pull the staples out. So we just use the fencing tool to pull the wire straight. Now what we would do is we would pull this staple out, which I don't have enough time to do at the moment. Kind of tighten the wire back around, hammer a new staple back into the post because the staple is part of what's holding it there. And then we just go ahead and twist our wire around our wire that's going back out here. But you can see just from this little stretch here, I was able to pull in a few inches of slack on this wire. Now, one of the great things about this tool is that the pliers are designed specifically for barbed wire so that you can grab the barbed wire and twist it to tie it off around the object that you're trying to wrap it around. I'm sure that you can sit here and go over a dozen different ways to use this tool, but all I can say is that if you are planning on doing any fencing projects on your property, I would definitely go out and get yourself a pair of fencing pliers, because you can use them on so many different fence types for so many different applications. It is a pretty awesome tool to have. I could not work on this farm without having fencing pliers. The next tool that you're going to need, whether you're running fences or you're trying to re-stretch fences that have been weakened or are loosened up, is your wire puller. Now, I've seen a lot of people use come-alongs for this, but these aren't very expensive tools, and when you have them, they're super handy. What they basically, as a design function, you're able to come in and actually stick your wire through here, and then it will kind of hold it in place. And they have that on both ends. So your wire would slip in. Let's get some wire here. The wire basically slips in down here, and then that comes down and holds it. And you do that on both sides. And that way, as you're kind of tightening this together, it can pull the wires together and tighten up your fence line. If you're pulling two wires together, it's because they're broken in the center and you're trying to mend them together. One of the things that I like about this tool is that it can easily sit against a post, because probably the best thing you could do is give yourself a lot of slack here, put this up against a post, and then you just kind of jack it up closer to the post. And we'll try and do some repairs on a few spots just to show you how that would work. But then you can take the wire around the post and tie it off using your pliers. So this tool is specifically designed for this type of work. It has a lot of functions. Again, it's like another Swiss Army knife in fencing. I don't see how you could be effective and timely in your fence repairs without having your fence stretcher, or your wire stretcher here, and your fence pliers. I mean, they're both pretty universal tools in doing this type of work. Now, when you're running a lot of barbed wire, your barbed wire comes in these big rolls, and they've got barbs all over them. They're pointy. I would definitely, if you have them, use a good set of leather work gloves, because these are gonna get you here and there. But I have another tool here, which is basically a spinning handle that will, when you attach it to your spindle of barbed wire, it allows the barbed wire to kind of roll. So as I'm walking the barbed wire along and I'm rolling it out, this will just allow it to roll and let the wire spin out. If I did not have this tool, I would have to then sit there and roll this constantly down the line. And as you can imagine, that could be a real pain. In fact, this roll of barbed wire is very heavy. There are numerous gauges of barbed wire. This is kind of a mid-grade barbed wire. But the important thing that you need to remember about barbed wire is that this has a galvanized coating on it. And so the more you bend it and twist it, the more you actually weaken the wire. And when you weaken that galvanized coating, that is what eventually leads to rust in the wire. And then, you know, as the wire rusts, it falls apart. And rusted wire can be very difficult to find, especially back in woods where it's rusted apart and fallen off. If you're new to your property like we were, I would highly suggest you go out and kind of scour the woods, wooded areas where there's fencing, to see if you can find any leftover barbed wire. Some ranchers have a bad habit of just dropping it and putting up a new line, but it can be very hazardous, especially with the barbs. It could get wrapped around a horse's foot. So definitely keep that in mind. But again, the things that weaken barbed wire over time is the extra bending in the wire, trying to wrap it around things where it shouldn't be wrapped. If you are properly stretching your wire using a wire stretcher and properly bending it using wire pliers, you're going to extend the life of your barbed wire. And in turn, that's going to make things a lot easier for you on your farm or ranch. What I'm going to do now is just take some of these tools out to where we have some wire and show you how they're used to fix it. I'm not going to carry this big roll of barbed wire down there right now. We don't need to roll out a spot, but I would like to show you how we've installed the barbed wire. Another important thing that you're going to need with the posts that we have, and I'll show you this out in the field, but these are clips that will basically go around your post, and then they will hold the wire against the post. And without these clips, you're pretty much wasting your time, because if you try and bend the wire around each of those little metal posts, not only are you weakening the wire, but you're not effectively installing it, and it's going to take you forever. So these little clips, a couple dollars a bag, very important, especially when you're putting it in front of the metal posts in between your larger posts. So let's go down. I'm going to show you where we ran some barbed wire and just explain a little more about how we put this all together. Okay, so we're out here in our field, and we have some barbed wire fencing that I ran in between where we're building our wood fence, which our wood fence will eventually go all the way down. And then we ran some barbed wire across here to an old barbed wire fence just to help keep the horses in. I only did 3 strands because we're doing this mainly to keep our horses in, and they don't like barbed wire, so as long as they see this fence, and it's pretty easy to see with the white caps, they haven't even messed with it. They do like the wood fence, they'll rub up all over it. But here is an example when we ran the wire to the post. We used our wire stretcher, and really I just kind of put it on the post like so, and then clipped the wire in and cranked it until I pulled the wire straight across. Now this, we have a wood post here, and it goes into a wood post back where the other fence line is, and that's really what I'm using to stretch this wire all the way across and keep it taut. Is I'm using, you know, the wood posts. These barbed wire loosens over time as it weathers. This is a couple years old now, so it could be tightened up. The corner here has just got, you know, I take my pliers and I kind of twist off the corner at the end, and that's pretty much what holds it in place after I've basically pulled my wire in or ratcheted it in. And once I get it to where I want it to be, I'll tie it off there. On these posts over here, we actually have those clips that I was showing you. The clips just kind of sit on the post. You can use your pliers to kind of wrap the clips and secure them into place. And those clips on those support posts in between really kind of help maintain the fence line for us, even if we lose a little bit of the tautness in the wire over time. They're still holding the wire up. And again, we don't want to wrap our barbed wire around those. We actually want to use those clips, because every time we bend this wire, we are weakening the galvanization of it, which is weakening the wire. So I was going to go over with you driving these posts in the ground real quick. When you start out with these posts, you can see this one's probably about 5 feet high right now, but they start off around 6.5 feet high. So as you can imagine, when you're pounding these down, I'm about 6 foot. You're starting up way up here, and then you're having to slide it down. Oops, hit my wire. But you're having to slide it down on the post to tap the post into the ground. Here's something that you need to be cautious of, and this is what got me, is these posts will fling out. They're flexible. So if while you're sliding this pounder up and down, you slightly come off and you hit right there, what happened to me was I was up high, and when I hit it, it came in and basically came right down on my head. Just like that, just and man, did it hurt, but it also flat out knocked me out for a few minutes, and I did have some concussion issues to deal with. But this is a very heavy object, and it's made for pounding these in the ground. So if you hit yourself in the head with it, it's extremely painful, and it could cause a serious concussion. Keeping in mind that these do flex. That's the problem. If these were a solid post and I missed it, it probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But because it flexes, it actually kind of brings it back on you a little bit if you hit it wrong. And that's why I was suggesting that for people who are new to this, to stay away from the spring-loaded ones. Stick with a basic one where you're having to do a more controlled up and down motion until you get used to pounding these in the ground, and you get used to the fact that, you know, this is moving down. Sometimes it's going to move down quicker than other pounds. So you really need to be paying attention to how far you just drove it down versus how high you're lifting it up. And the white here is a pretty good indicator for when you're putting these down. As you pull it up, you see a little bit of white, go ahead and slam it again. Don't try and get as much clearance as you can to get as much of an effect. That's where you could come off the post and accidentally injure yourself. So that is my tip on using these. And again, like I said, if I ever get injured, I don't mind telling you guys about it. I know some of the comments are negative, but here's the thing. If somebody injures themselves, there's a reason why they injured themselves, and if they can explain it to somebody else, hopefully they can keep somebody else from having the same type of injury. I've used these post drivers a lot over the years. I used to build docks on the Outer Banks, and I put some camps in Maine, and I have never had an accident using one. But what ultimately got me is the flexibility of these fence posts as I was driving them in, and these are pretty heavy duty ones.